The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain. Today we're back with Bill Bennett. Good to have you in the studio, Bill.
Yeah, hi, Paul.
Welcome to 2023. It's nice to get back into things. Have you had a bit of a break?
Yeah, but I've mainly spent the time doing stuff around the house, the garden, all the sort of things that I should really do all year round, but just don't have time.
Well, it's time to get back into tech, Bill. It's all happening. We've got a whole lot to delve into today. ChatGPT seems to be all through the news. Yeah, we've obviously been talking about it. You've been looking at it. I think everybody in the tech sector has been very curious and experimenting and learning and what's its role. So we'll delve into that because it's certainly hitting the mainstream media.
Isn't
big
it
time.
nice not to be talking about Twitter?
So true. Want to delve into new Prime Minister being sworn in, Chris Hipkins. What's that gonna mean for New Zealand from a tech perspective? There's of course been a big round of layoffs if we sort of stack up, all the folks in the US that have been hit by the Microsofts and AWSs and Googles and all these layoffs. But is there a silver lining? So I'm keen for us to delve into what impact could that have for New Zealand. We're hearing about ships that have been impacted by ransomware, leaving sort of ships at sea without quite the right connectivity and so on in the normal manner. And then gadget news. Well, Apple have done a refresh, which I think some people were very pleased about. So lots to get through. Let's start off with ChatGPT. Seems to be now getting that mainstream attention, partly because of Microsoft's investment, which had been rumored over the last few weeks and they've been involved with OpenAI, which is what ChatGPT sits under, for quite a number of years, and over at least $1 billion worth of investment, in there from reasonably early on, and OpenAI using Microsoft's Azure services, so having it sit on top of Microsoft's cloud. But this Microsoft news today seems to have sort of spurred on the media. I did an interview earlier with TV3 for 6 o'clock news, and as that was finishing up, I did a live radio interview. So there's this attention on something that's probably not been on people's radars, and now it's here, and I think it's drawing up really a whole bunch of questions. What should happen in education? There are some schools that are just outright blocking access to ChatGPT, so it doesn't get kind of used live in the classroom to cheat, shall we say? I think is the thinking behind that. But then there's I think you want to take the sort of the longer term view, but how quickly can you get there? Because this just becomes another technology tool that should be used in education as it should be used in other places, shouldn't it?
Yeah, well, the thing about the technology is it's kind of there and it kind of isn't there both at the same time. It's like a sort of Schrodinger's cat kind of technology. And by that, I mean that there's enough there for it to cause an awful lot of mischief.
Yes.
There's a lot of bad things you can do with it, and there's a lot of naughty things you can do with it, and things like cheating in exams and so on would be that. But on the other hand, I know it's on our story list, but I should mention it now, is that the whole business about a news service, technology news service, CNET, using it to write stories. But a lot of the stories that came out were written by the software were wrong. They were incorrect, and they certainly didn't read very well. It wasn't very successful. I mean, it saved them a bunch of money, and it probably meant they could sell advertising and so on. But it's probably hurt their business to have done that. So
Well, they were CNET were very naughty because
they
they
didn't
published
disclose.
content that was being generated by AI. They didn't put that in the byline.
Yeah.
It wasn't clear. They had picked particular sorts of topics that you would expect ChatGPT to be able to do a reasonably capable job on, but it doesn't do a perfect
Oh.
job. And they seem to take this content without involving journalists in the process, or certainly not to the extent they should have done. And so, what went up was rubbish, right?
And
in
they,
some cases,
it looks
was a
like
shocker.
it looks like they weren't reading the results before pushing it out as well, which is even worse.
Yeah.
Look, the thing is, and that's what I mean when I say it's kind of here and now, and it's in one sense. In another sense, it's not here and now. It's not ready for that kind of job yet. Of course, it soon will be. But soon in the tech sector I've mentioned this a number of times in the past on the podcast, right? Is that things just do not evolve in straight lines. They simply don't. And the classic example is I'm coming up to in fact, I think I've just gone past my 40th anniversary writing about business and technology. So I've been doing it for a long, long time. And when
Since you were about 5, Bill.
Well, since I left uni, yeah. And when I was just starting out, there was this new thing called speech recognition, which everyone was excited about. Everyone thought was going to change the world in a couple of years. And speech recognition kind of matured about 5 or 6 years ago now. It took 30 years plus for it to get to that point of maturity where it was, it's now really good. But for a long, long time, it just wasn't. And it wasn't until we had the brute force computing power and the AI to go back and and check things and so on, and the huge databases to call on. Back in the 80s when it was new, we didn't know those things were necessary to make it a hit, a hit product, a thing that really worked. And I think we're at the same point with this AI we're talking about now, is that it looks like it's going to be ready in a couple of years' time. But it may be ready. It may be ready it could be ready next month, but it could be. We have to wait years. The other classic example of that, of course, is driverless cars.
Yeah, look, I think that you could draw some lines between the two. I guess what I would say around a tool like ChatGPT, and we've had this sort of generative artificial intelligence, particularly from OpenAI now, for a period of years in different forms, is the use. There is an immediate, there's an immediate use that actually can be available on a very widespread basis, and you don't have to wait for it to be perfect to find use cases where it is useful. Whereas driverless vehicles, there's probably a little bit more at stake if you get it wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, there is, and things like pushing out a weather forecast. That's sort of application, like a journalistic application that would work for it. Things like company results. When companies announce their results, you don't really need a human to regurgitate stuff from the annual results meeting. That can be organized by AI, because the stories tend to follow the same pattern when you have that.
Yeah, and I remember a talk I gave in the US probably 4 years ago, and one of the examples that I was talking about was these AI generated news articles to do with movement and stock prices, and that's certainly been happening for quite a few years. Although ChatGPT does take that to quite a next level compared to where we were there 4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing is that we have this thing with these kind of innovative areas where things are moving quite fast, but they're not necessarily moving towards the goals and the endpoints that we're expecting. So I reckon, look, I've already confessed that I've been a journalist for 40 years, so you can probably tell that I'm not that far off retirement age. And I reckon that we're not going to.
You've got another 20 years in your bill. Come on.
Well, I either way, Paul. I think I should get to retirement without journalists being replaced by bots, wholesale anyway.
Yeah.
But that said, I can say it can do a lot already, and it it does affect things like schools and so on. I mean, if you actually read some of the AI generated text, you can tell that it's not well. You know, not all students can write well anyway. Sometimes you can't. But it just looks odd. But then so does some student text. So
yeah, and look, looking at those sort of education examples, and we've got Paul Woodfield sitting across in the room, listening to us, of course, as a university. What do we call you, Paul? Lecturer. And so on. So I mean, he'd be a lot closer to us than this in terms of the realities. But I guess the way I see it is there's obviously benefit if you can use a tool to work out whether something is or isn't sort of AI generated.
Yeah.
Sometimes, as you say, Bill, it's going to be obvious, but I think really we've got to move past that to this is just one of the tools available, just in the same way the internet's available to us. But there's going to be a journey here. We've got schools that are blocking access to chat GPT, and so this is sort of what's, I guess, stirring up some of that mainstream media attention, is that this is a new phenomenon, and yes, a lot of it's to come in the future, but also I think the disruption, it had already started because there are elements of it available, but because it's so widespread, it's really going to start stirring things up, and it's huge.
And like any new technology, it's got like a dark side and a good side. And I mean, the dark side is, I just hate to think what's going to happen for things like misinformation in places like Facebook and Twitter now, until now, you've needed to have teams of people sitting somewhere in the Soviet Union, or the ex-Soviet Union, churning stuff out. Now you can do it like at the press of a button. So there's all kinds of bad things that can happen. We don't need to sort of talk too much about them, but there's some good things too. I mean, there's applications in many areas where it's going to be really powerful and useful. So I don't know, what the point I think is important is the point I made earlier is that we're at that point where it's kind of here now and it kind of isn't here now, and it's not going to be a linear ride from where we are today to where it's going. It's going to jump about a bit, and it's going to evolve in fits and starts.
Yeah. I think there are so many things we can delve into. There's also been the news coverage around how they've built, or the resources they've used, the people that they've used in Africa to try and get ChatGPT to come up with stuff that's nice and not too nasty. And, to do that, I guess it reminds us of some of the stories we heard around Facebook moderators and so on. It's like you've got this group of people that's had, ultimately has been exposed to some really, nasty content in order to try and shape the platform. For me, the positive of that is as AI gets better, as this technology gets better, hopefully less and less you need to have people getting exposed, but there's going to be a toll along the way when people are exposed to extreme content.
Some of those earlier chat applications which were online, they very quickly evolved to become racist or sexist or even misogynistic and so on, and just because people could literally input that material and get it out. So I think that's the key is, and we've talked about this in the past as well, is that the any form of any sort of algorithm, and in a sense, this is like a form of algorithms. They've really got to be stress tested against biases, and it's quite conceivable that an AI could develop its own biases. They
will for all sorts of reasons, because they're usually drawing on what's out there on the internet already. And look, these things aren't going to be perfect, and who decides what's perfect anyway, right? So we've all got our particular leanings based on personal experiences, based on, political preferences, and, all manner of things. So these things is actually quite, it's quite complex, and there'll be probably a variation where you can get, you can ask a question and you can get the out of the box answer, and then you can ask the question and say, well, what's that, taking this viewpoint into consideration, or that viewpoint, and other things. So there's going to be different, flavors of results. I imagine.
That's right. And one of the things I look forward to with this is that you can use the same technology to police the technology. I mean, so it contains the solution as well as the problem.
Yep. Look, I think there's a great opportunity here around ChatGPT, as there always are with new technologies. And what we have to do is look out for what those negative things are, and look out for ways to appropriately consider them, address them. Those within the education sector are going to have to, in some cases, do new things, and we hear about exams which are pen and paper and so on. Look, there's a level to which we've had to do these things for years. The internet came along, and you want somebody to do something. It's like, well, you do this particular test in person because it's not an open book test that you can do remotely, or you do with access to the internet. But we have to keep it in balance. And if you don't give people access to, maybe it's a hiring process, and you don't give people access to ChatGPT and these sorts of tools, you might be getting an incorrect view of their capabilities, because this is going to be one of the standard tools that they use in order to carry out their work.
And if everyone else is using it, you're at an disadvantage if you're not. I mean, I think with things like education and exams and that, there are some universities where they have quite high level exams which are actually verbal, where you sit in front of a panel and answer questions and so on. And I think we'll probably see more of that kind of examination in future because of this. But look, it's such early days. If we'd sat down and talked 40 years ago about what's happening with speech technology, we probably would have been making those linear projections of where things were going. And it's as I say, it's going to be fits and starts, and there'll be some dead ends as well. There'll be some things that happen and then stop happening. It's such early days.
I do think we want to be looking for those opportunities within our workplaces. How do we, whether it's these opportunities for whole new businesses to spring up, and new disruptive ways of doing things as these new technology comes through. In other cases, it's just it's going to allow an organization to compete with another that doesn't use the tools, but it's getting it right, doing it in appropriate ways.
I mean, and there will be an impact on jobs, but it might not be that it destroys jobs. It might be that it just changes the nature of jobs, so that if you're, say, for example, if you're someone in a organization whose job is to produce words, for speeches or presentations or whatever, maybe your job becomes editing the output of the AI and knocking that into shape and
giving it guidance, and so on, and then shaping. Look, I think we've got to be putting on that futurist hat, taking that viewpoint. How do we leverage this technology to balance things up, to make help New Zealand do better on the global stage, to look at how does it give those who maybe have missed out in the past a chance to do better. I mean, there's so many possibilities with it, and I think we get it right, we will help individuals across New Zealand. And if we can come up with some of those new innovations and lead the way, then that's something that then obviously can, bring money back into New Zealand's economy, which has a flow on too. So, I hope we'll have some great successes in these regards. And time will tell. But New Zealanders are often very good at being creative and coming up with some of those new ideas. And can do that and move quickly and make them work from a business perspective.
Well, I'm
It could be
absolutely
pretty
thrilled
exciting.
at the idea of having an AI do my accounts, for example.
There you go. Yeah, I think there's for all of us there are things we'd prefer not to be doing, and sometimes those are with people. Sometimes the technology, the AI can do the lifting. So yeah. Now, looking New Zealand. So this is my question to you, Bill. Chris Hipkins, the new man at the top, taking over from Jacinda as Prime Minister Wednesday. Any viewpoints on what that will mean for New Zealand's technology landscape? What changes are afoot? Because we expect there to be change when there's a new Prime Minister.
Well,
things get mixed up a bit, right?
There's some, but I don't think it'd be huge. And the reason it's not going to be huge is because we're only 9 months out from election. We have a minister in charge of telecommunications and basically the tech sector, who is retiring at this coming up the coming election. So I don't see there being anything radical between now and the election. I think after the election we'll see. The thing about Hipkins from this point of view is that Hipkins is much more focused on business and the economy than Jacinda Ardern, who was very focused on other things. I mean, and God knows she had enough of a job to do with dealing with pandemics and volcanoes and terrorists and so on. And so I think that was a huge distraction for government. But even that said, right, technology just really wasn't her thing in the way that it's much more Chris Hipkins' thing. And I think you'll be paying more attention to it. And I think we'll be seeing more happen in that area. But really, realistically, with an election looming, not a lot.
All right. Well, we'll certainly be monitoring how that plays out. And I think being an election year, I'm really interested to look at delving into some of these topics. There's obviously a potential to talk to and get viewpoints from what's happening and what we need for New Zealand's success, of course, is to be leveraging technology appropriately, and in some areas we've really failed.
Well, yeah, I mean, but like, for example, as far as government policy is concerned, telecommunications is pretty much done. I mean, we've built a network, a fibre network. We're extending broadband further into the country. The market is competitive. It's functioning well. I think that side of things.
We've been incredibly successful.
We have been, and it's not just this the Labour government; it's the previous national government as well. It's been like 15 years of getting that stuff right in terms of the telecommunications sector. Maybe not so much elsewhere in the sector. And do you remember all that talk when the government first came to power about having a supremo, a sort of tech supremo, a national CIO, if you like? That never really happened, and it looked like a good idea at the time. I'm not so sure that it was. I mean, we discussed that and we thought maybe it could be a good idea, but in hindsight, I don't think we missed anything by not doing that. But what we do lack is an understanding of where technology fits into the economy at that cabinet level. And it's not a Labour problem. It's a problem with any party in power.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll never know what might have happened with that role because it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. I do feel as though the more sort of advocacy for what can be done and sort of nudging policies and so on in the right direction, and there's an aspect with technological things where they move very, very quickly, and if government doesn't manage to keep up, then you can have you potentially have a detrimental impact. And we were looking at aerospace a few months ago, and the time at the New Zealand Aerospace Summit, and look, it was great to have the ministers there and talking and announcing one or two things, but the feeling coming through was, oh, Australia's got ahead. The government's really, put resources in there to help them move ahead, and that New Zealand was, is losing ground, and so
Well,
so I mean, it's really hard to do these things because the government's only got, there's only so much money they can do without taxing us to death, that they can spend. So it's always going to be a balancing
yeah, well,
act, and that's never gonna no one you're never gonna please everybody.
no,
right?
there's
Just
one
can't
area
happen.
that I'm concerned about, and again, it's not just the current government. It's something which will be the case over the last 20 years, and that is that the large multinationals seem to get the government's ear much easier than our local technology companies. So, for example, if you were to talk to someone in government, and any one of the last 4 or 5 governments we've had in this country, about, say, cloud computing, they'll tell you about Microsoft, and they'll tell you about Google, and they'll tell you about AWS. They won't tell you about Catalyst or Datacom, and really they should be more tuned in to championing our heroes and our tech companies who quite frankly do a great job, but they don't have sophisticated lobbying machines to get in front of politicians and so on, and that's something that bothers me. And again, it's across all government. It's not a party thing at all.
Yeah. That's a huge can of worms. We might have to save delving into that for another day, Bill. Couple of other things on the local front. Spark won a contract with parliamentary services. That's something that you've written about recently. Does that make is that a big deal at all, Bill?
It's a prestige deal. It's good for, and it's a good thing for Spark to be getting that momentum and taking that contract. It's also much bigger than it looks because there's about sort of 1,200 seats involved of people that would use those services. So that's a relatively large. I mean, there wouldn't be many accounts in New Zealand that are more than that. So it's big, but it's not huge, and it's not going to sort of change things much. They talked at the time of the deal being signed. They talked a little bit about Spark getting involved with the innovation and so on in that area, and there will be some, but it's not the kind of area where you can expect sort of a breakthrough that's going to change everything about the way Parliament operates. But it's an important thing, it's a prestige thing, and it's a feather in Spark's cap.
And the Vodafone rebrand to One, you also wrote about that on your website on billbennett.co.nz. There's a little bit of maybe a legal tussle there between TVNZ, who have got One is a brand of theirs from a One News, and
I mean
the station. So there's a little bit of a tussle. Do you think that this is just something to be worked through? That there's not likely to be a big issue because they're quite different products, right? And you can have quite different brands. Really.
There is. It's not a huge deal, but there is Vodafone's website. If you go to Vodafone's website, they're not showing any branding there.
Not yet.
And that's possibly because I'm guessing here that probably they have to license the brand from Vodafone Group in the UK, the old Vodafone brand, and that license, that agreement might have stopped. It may have stopped, or they may have decided for strategic reasons they don't want to use the outgoing brand anymore. But they haven't replaced it with a new brand, or at least the last time I looked yesterday, which was the last time I looked. I haven't looked today. It may be there now, but it hadn't changed. And the other problem for Vodafone is that I would guess that they're probably not getting into any big marketing campaigns until that's resolved. But then again, this time of year, you wouldn't get into a huge marketing campaign.
Yeah. So, I mean, the impression I got from the last chat is it's not too far off, but it's probably not happening in January anyway. Was the last
we'll
last
be done
chat
when we go back to work.
So that's a lot of the local things. I guess the other thing that has a New Zealand impact that I wanted to delve into were these job cuts. Silicon. I mean, not just in Silicon Valley, but it's certainly the big US, tech giants, layoffs in every single direction.
I've got the
tens of
headline numbers. I
thousands,
want to
right?
read out the headline numbers here because I
Oh, thank you. That'd be
researched
great.
this, right. Microsoft, 10,000 jobs. Amazon, 18,000 jobs. Facebook, 11,000 jobs. Salesforce, 7,000 jobs. Google, I think, is 11 or 12,000. It's not, I think the numbers changed since they first announced it. And of course, there's about 5,000 jobs at Twitter as well. So that all adds up just more than 60,000 jobs, significantly more than 60,000 jobs.
That's a huge personal toll, isn't it, to all those families?
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are huge. The thing is all of these companies will have some people in some of these roles in New Zealand. They may be not many, but there'll be people remote working into those companies from New Zealand, and that's some of those will be involved. There won't be a huge number, and the thing is we still have such a skill shortage here that's not going to be an issue. Those people are not going to struggle to find, or most of them won't struggle to find new work, on the back of that. But the other impact that it's going to have is that it means that there's like 60,000. Oh, sorry. The other thing is not all those people are necessarily tech jobs. So some of those Amazon jobs are people in warehouses and so on. So they're not all developers. And they're not all tech jobs.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, for instance, saw that as did a lot within that online commerce, e-commerce world that was doing deliveries, and to a degree, I know for myself anyway, I'm doing more. I guess it's a journey. I'm doing more online, ordering of things, whether it's groceries through Soupy in New Zealand yesterday. I bought some shoes from. Bought some shoes yesterday. So I'm doing more of these things. So there's a level to which that's grown, but also when we couldn't go out and lockdowns and things in place, there was a lot of hiring done from that. But there's another perspective of this hiring, Bill, that you and I were chatting about before we started. Do you want to delve into that?
Yeah, because the thing is that these companies are not. I mean, they're all suffering in terms of their share price. I mean, the share price of tech companies is really low compared to what it was, say, 18 months ago. But they're actually all still quite profitable, with the possible exception of Facebook. But in general, profits are actually doing, in terms of profit, doing really well. So why are they laying off people now? Well, there's two reasons for it. One is because during the pandemic, they went crazy hiring. They just literally sucked up people out of the market. And in part, companies wanted to hoard talent, so that their rivals didn't necessarily get hold of it. That was what there was such a fight for talent at that point that people probably overreacted. And the other thing is that they have some kind of metrics where they their revenues and so on, the metrics in terms of counting the dollars per head in terms of revenue and so on. Possibly because they overreacted, by doing this, what they've done is they've reset the market for tech jobs particularly in the US in particular, but to a degree globally. So those big pay rises which people were getting because of the shortage of employees and so on, that's probably going to come to a bit of a halt now. You're not going to be able to have. If you're in the market and you're, say, a skilled developer with certain expertise in AI or whatever, you're not going to have Microsoft, Google, and Facebook bidding for your work, and that's something which I think they needed to do because the salaries were probably getting out of control in comparison to what people were delivering to their employers. The thing that's happened as part of all this process is you keep hearing stories about things like the free breakfasts and the massage at your desk and all those sort of things, like
some insane perks within that perks. Tech world and the startup land as well, right?
Yeah, they're on the way out. So I should imagine that along with these people being lost, there'll be catering staff and health staff and so on, it'll be gone as well. But it's really quite dramatic, and it's happened very quickly. I mean, it's happened in the space of about 2 months.
Yeah, one stat that a lot of folks may have missed was that Amazon overall doubled their workforce between 2020 and early 2020 and early 2022. So when we do look at these things, it is in light of there being an incredible amount of hiring, for a range of reasons. Now, in terms of a silver lining for New Zealand, for our tech companies, for our non-tech companies that are trying to leverage technology more, hire developers, hire a mix of skill sets.
Well, there's 60,000 out there now.
Then you've got that potential, don't you?
Yeah.
And then there's probably is the other aspect of, if this kind of maybe dampens those, opens up a bigger pool, because it's been very hard to to find talent, and then there's been the challenges with just how extreme, in some particular, sections of the tech segment, it's been very expensive, to hire sort of certain skills. These are things that should help New Zealand, surely.
I think so. I mean, particularly now that we've got used to the idea of remote working, there's no reason why someone in Seattle or San Francisco or anywhere else shouldn't be working for developing for a New Zealand company.
Yeah, though interestingly, and we saw it, probably at the more extreme end with Musk's companies, but there does seem to be more of a trend to back to the office, so that I think it's going to be quite fascinating to see where do we settle at in terms of how that actually plays out. There are good upsides in terms of having a distributed force and people able to work in different time zones and work with other people in those time zones, having people local to customers, but just spreading everybody out everywhere is certainly not an ideal fit for every single business, right? So
no,
there's
but
going to be
there
an
will be
interesting
people
mix.
that relocated during the last 2 years to go and live somewhere where they want to live, as opposed to living near the office. That will have happened.
Do we need some special visas to attract some of this talent into New Zealand?
Yeah, I would say we do. I also say that amongst that 60,000, there will be enough New Zealanders wanting to come home as well. We've all heard of stories of people that have gone here to Silicon Valley or to the US to work. Some of those people, because you've got to remember, right, if you're not a US citizen, you're not entitled to anything. So and they won't have healthcare if they've lost their job. So some of those people, there will be people amongst them who will think, okay, that's it, I'm going home.
Well, some of them are being pushed out, and you see this on Twitter and other social media, where folks are sharing their story of what does this mean? I had my dream job. I always dreamed of working at Google. I've had it. I was told how well I was performing. That was yesterday. Overnight, I got an email that I didn't see. I turned up and tried to swipe into the office. I couldn't get on. There's a sort of a real, just shocking aspect to the way this happens on a big scale, as just in terms of, what does that do to you to turn up at work and it's just the computer says no, as well as the fact you're going to be kicked out of the country in some cases.
Well, it's like the industrial era where people were like working in factories and so on, and the factory would close. It's that kind of vibe to it. And but these people are sort of white collar people with degrees, higher degrees. But, a lot of them will have academic debts to pay, for their education, that they haven't paid off their student fees and so on. So it's affecting a different class of person for sure, a different type of person. But and it's brutal. But the the world can be quite brutal.
I mean, it seems some of it is quite inhuman in that this is where maybe the smaller firms gain more of a cachet in future because they're able to, or they do, hopefully, treat people a little bit better than how a big behemoth has to. Because some of this, I guess, comes down to, maybe they can't figure out another way than otherwise. And I'm trying to think through all the bits and pieces of how it comes together, but you make a decision, you kind of do have to move quite quickly.
Yeah, you do. I mean, they will have to move fast. Look, I think we'll see some people come home. There won't be many. It'll be a couple, 200 or 300 tops. But I think, I think there'll probably be less people leaving to go to that, because those opportunities won't be there for them to leave to go to. So there's benefits there, but there's also benefits in the fact that there's a remote workforce ready to roll sitting in those countries or mainly the US, those parts of the US where these companies were based.
Well, I hope that New Zealand is seen as a place now, and our companies, our startups, and varying tech businesses and so on are seen as maybe taking well-being into consideration a little bit more, and maybe there's a bit of rub off from Jacinda's brand in terms of how New Zealand firms are thought of, and I guess that comes down to the actions of our own firms, but there's a level to which we're all smaller and we're going to get that stuff a bit.
There is another aspect to that though that you've kind of touched on there, and that is when Twitter went through this process of sacking people around the world. It's fine to do that in America. You can just tell someone to get out that day in most states. Some states you have to give them some time or some warning, and there are some conditions. But in some states of America, you can literally go into work that day and that's it. You hand your cards and you're gone
without having to pay them a
severance. You can't do that in other countries.
Yeah.
Right. And Twitter came up against that in a lot of countries. They broke the law and broke employment law when they did that. And I would imagine that would have happened with some of these as well. Some of these people that are not necessarily based in the US.
I guess they've got a mechanism. They lock you out, and then they maybe later they look and go, okay, we're going to give you 3 months notice. So here's 3 months pay or whatever it is.
We know for sure that, for example, Microsoft would do anything in Australia or New Zealand with local employment law in mind.
Well, you hope so. I mean, I guess they've been doing it long enough. They know how to get that stuff right here. But likes of Twitter, they seem to not quite get their head around that in some cases you just can't do that. There's a very formal long-term
people
process.
That had that knowledge.
Yeah. You don't have an HR department to figure that out. Yeah. Okay. Well, lastly, Bill, Apple. We have, I guess over the years at times we've seen Apple innovating and coming through with regular cutting edge products and services into the market. Other times on the show we've talked about, look how slow Apple is with refreshing some of their systems. And in fact there was a story last week about somebody that looked up a trade-in on a $50,000 plus Mac Pro. It was 4 years old, and I think they were offered a X $100 trade-in for it on the Apple site. People were calling it out. But last week we had some good announcements around new MacBook Pros, M2 base, so their latest iterations of their chips, new iterations we hadn't seen before. The Mac Mini, a refresh in there. I think, Apple is doing very, very well on this front. If we put aside the real pro, high end side, in terms of a replacement for that, they've still got an Intel product.
They are. I mean, I was looking the other day. I was looking at the numbers for the PC sector in general, and they're down. Basically, the surge in sales which happened during the pandemic is over, and we're back to the long-term trend line. And I forget the exact number, but we're down 15%, I think it is, year on year in terms of PC sales across the board. But Apple's market share has increased steadily over the last period, and they're at their highest market share ever now, because the new Apple Silicon Macs are so much better than anything else. I mean, it's actually quite stunning when you see the performance compared with the best that the Windows machines can do these days. So Apple have definitely got that right.
They've totally outplayed Microsoft when it comes to putting ARM type technology into computers by a long shot.
I think they're probably a year, 2 years ahead of the market in terms of that, possibly more, because it's been 2 years now since those, and nothing's appeared.
The foundations, that Apple, laid for where they're at now, I would say come back to when they acquired, I can't remember the name of the chip maker that they bought that was making ARM chips. I mean, that is, quite a number of, years ago now. And they've worked away. Obviously, that's really helped them on the iPhone, the iPad, iPad Pro side. They've just, they've had a good result that works out really well. I mean, they must have paid for that acquisition a long, long time ago, but now they're reaping the rewards of foundations laid a long, long time ago. And I don't know, what Microsoft's chances are of having something competitive even in 2 years.
Well,
I mean,
I'm gonna say something.
It could be 4 or 5. Maybe they've, it's.
I'm going to say something incredibly controversial here. I don't think Microsoft cares, right? I really don't. I think that Surface is an important product line for them in terms of positioning, but the real business at Microsoft is Azure and perhaps that sort of enterprisey stuff that it's doing, which is kind of ironic because Microsoft's history comes from the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
True.
But Microsoft is making so much money in its enterprise space that stuff it's really just a sort of positioning. It's almost like they're keeping their hand in, just in case the market changes and things swing back again.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone in Microsoft, I think the product managers, the Surface product managers are losing sleep over it. Mm-hmm. But I think if you go to the senior suite in Seattle, you go up to Microsoft headquarters, I don't think the exec team is losing sleep about this, because something, probably a good third to half of those MacBooks that are being sold are hooked up somehow to Microsoft products and services. Which is where the money is. Which is where their money is. So I mean, the surprise story of the last 10 years. There's two. One is the absolute strength of Apple that went from before the iPhone, it wasn't in a great shape at all, but it's became the world's most powerful and richest and wealthiest company. But the story that's not told so much about is that the other company, which is up there with Apple in that same level of wealth and success, is Microsoft. But it hasn't done that through Windows or Surface. It's done that through the other stuff that it does, and that's the untold story. And a lot of people in the tech sector are still thinking in terms of Microsoft Windows and Word 6 and and Clippy and so on. Whereas really, that's not Microsoft. Microsoft is the days of, when Microsoft was founded, the company was IBM, and that's Microsoft is the IBM of our generation.
Yeah, look, I think, there's a huge amount we could delve into, unpack. We're kind of out of time. My head's exploding with sort of different angles and perspectives we could delve
go
into
an hour on that,
their build, because that is huge, and the way all their different bits and pieces fit together, and one bit of business enables and opens the door for another. But we're seeing that with Apple, and you're talking about the Apple market share. And we've been hearing some of the rumor mill stuff that's come out today actually around Apple and their new VR headset, and there's quite a bunch online that's leaked over the last few hours, certainly 24 hours on that. And you sort of join up these dots of a very, very powerful ecosystem that looks as though they've got they've got a lot of years ahead of them.
Yeah.
When you see how this is working, because they're just continuing, and even if that what they release on that virtual reality, augmented reality, doesn't end up, being the success that they would like it to be, and we don't know. There's nothing,
Well,
too far out yet. The way these things work together, and just encourage somebody that's got one toe in the Apple ecosystem to invest more and more. The HomePod, that's part of that. There's a very tight integration
well,
here.
that's right. I mean, if Apple's services was a separate company, or if Apple's watch business was a separate company, they'd be Fortune 500 companies, right? They are bigger than. I mean, it's the biggest watch company. It's the Apple services is big enough to be a Fortune 500 company. You mentioned the HomePod, the new HomePod. You see, here's the thing, right? People think it's a smart speaker, so they think Alexa, but Alexa's purpose is to flog stuff through Amazon. That's what it exists for. That's why Amazon sells Alexa at a loss, and in fact, it's cut its losses recently in that market. But Apple's HomePod is really about having a nice speaker which plays your Apple music and works with your other Apple bits and pieces, and it's all part of that, enveloping walled garden of Appleness, which is actually quite special, and it's different from Amazon's what they couldn't. I mean, on the surface, they're just two speakers that are enabled with speech recognition and some smart stuff, but their purpose couldn't be more different. And the same goes for when Apple will step into that VR space. It's not going to step into the same VR space that, say, Meta is dealing with the metaverse. It will be, I don't know what it will be, but it will be something which works with everything else Apple for sure. But you know what I'm saying? They have a different way of looking at the world, and it's one that has worked until now.
Well, they talk the commentary we've seen so far suggests an incredible FaceTime tie-in, and other like Facebook are looking to do something with Microsoft Teams, and so on, and make. But Apple are trying to build up, or continuing to build on the sort of the walled garden that we've heard about so many times, and in many ways it's been very successful. Now, before we wrap up, just a couple of things, I guess, just hands-on with technology. Apple had sent across the MacBook Air M2 I've been using recently. I'm not on it now because I left it somewhere today. I'm hoping to recover it this afternoon because it also has my son's passport in it, and we're on a plane tomorrow. So yes, but the experience with these their Apple Silicon, with their chips, with the M2 is really encouraging. And from a lot of the things that we've seen in terms of the info around these new MacBook Pros, I think they're going to be real powerhouses, and Apple's positioning themselves very well. You can now order a MacBook Pro 96 gigabytes of RAM, and this is all built in. So there is a bit of a downside to old days. We used to be able to upgrade the RAM, but some really good performance there.
When I got my M1 MacBook Air, I put Windows on it for I could, and I wanted to test it, and it ran Windows faster than the Windows computer we got at home, which is an i7. So
there's a whole lot more we could sort of delve into there. I mean, you look at the specs of the MacBook Pro 16-inch with the M2 Max, 12 core CPU, 38 core GPU, and then 16 core neural engine. And those are just numbers, of course, but ultimately they're squeezing a lot of power into a small and light device. And Apple have had their times in history where we talked about where sometimes they're not haven't refreshed devices, and there's they haven't refreshed their complete full full range of offerings. But this gives you a lot of power in that laptop
They do it when
form
they're
factor.
ready, I think.
Yeah. The other gadget that I have been looking at, I think we talked about this last year, Echo Show 15 from Amazon. We're talking about Alexa and so on. And I meant to cover this off last year, but I got a little email through from them saying, "Oh, we've done a software update, and the Amazon Fire TV, which you buy as a sort of stick to plug into your TV, they pushed that whole capability into that Echo Show 15. So it's not only the Echo Show, and the Netflix. It's like it's the whole sort of full capability there in terms of all the streaming apps and everything else that you can run now. So it's quite interesting to see Amazon extending their sort of ecosystem, and I'm kind of curious how this plays out with all these little sort of joined up elements, because of course to them selling something is also selling a subscription, right? As getting you onto their subscription for music, for TV, and so on, and all of these things are starting to shape out, quite a powerful ecosystem for Amazon that starts becoming quite a strong tool for them.
There's some weird stuff with Amazon though, because I had a support call into Amazon the other day, because I've got Amazon, I've got Prime Video.
Yep,
as part of my broadband package.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And
who's doing that?
Through 2 Degrees.
Yeah.
And I had a support query for Amazon, and I called them, and they said, "Oh, you're not a Prime customer." I thought, is that because I got it through 2 Degrees, or is that? Well, it turns out that I'm not a Prime customer, even though I've got the Prime Video. And the thing is it's, and the reason for my support call, right, is because I was getting messages from Amazon in German.
Oh my God!
For some reason, I thought, and I just thought, look, these could be security messages. I'd like to know. Can you just make sure I'm getting them in English?
Yeah.
I spent 2 hours on support, and I was told that I'm not a Prime customer, which is. But the point about Amazon is the back bits don't join up, right? I'm pretty sure that if I was to get on a 2-hour, well, I wouldn't get on a 2-hour support call with Apple, but if you was to call Apple about something, they'd know who you were. They know what the problem is. They know every bit of kit. You know what I mean. They would know all that. It just wouldn't be a question. And I thought that was actually quite insightful, that in that Amazon isn't kind of joined up round the back in the way that companies like Apple and Microsoft are. So there's actually something in the Amazon DNA which isn't quite right, and it's almost old-fashioned for that not to be the case.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, be interesting. I'd like to delve into that a little bit more, and I have seen some evidence of that actually. So that's fascinating. All right. Well, we've had a great podcast. Thank you, Bill. Some really good insights. Always good to have you on the show. Now, people can go to billbennett.co.nz to sign up for your newsletter and keep up with some of the your tech content that you're putting out there. Of course, you write for other media like New Zealand Herald on not just tech, but a range of other subjects too, right?
Yeah, business subjects. Yeah. And I'm still on Twitter, but not so much. There's not so much. I mean, Twitter's actually gone a bit quiet for me. And it's not me. I haven't left Twitter, but Twitter seems to be leaving me.
I think it's the last few months has been an interesting period with Twitter, and we will see what the year holds on that front. Thanks everybody for listening in, and thank you of course to our show partners, Vodafone, 2 Degrees, Spark, HP, and Gorilla Technology for their support, keeping us going. And of course, if you've been watching the live stream, do fire up a podcast app on your smartphone right now. whether that's Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. Pocket Cast is my favorite. Of course, we're on Spotify, so you can go in there and search for NZ Tech Podcast and follow or subscribe depending on the app to get the regular audio episodes. And that can be easier to consume than a long form video. But if you're listening on the audio side, which is the bulk of our audience, you do want to catch the live shows sometimes, then certainly follow me on LinkedIn, and we're also across Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. So and probably this year there will be from time to time some shorter form content that'll come out, video wise as well. So even if you're not necessarily free at the time that we record typically on a Tuesday afternoon that we're streaming, there can still be some benefit there. So that's us. Bill Bennett NZ on Twitter.
Yep. For now.
Okay, that's good. And anywhere else people should be looking?
I'm around.
Yeah. That's good. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll catch you again on the next episode. Take care. See ya.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.